All right, so now that we've finished the quiz, I want to give you a little big picture perspective on what you're going to be learning this week. So we're continuing on and going to finish most of what's in the week 3 of the Coursera course. And most of that is just more practice with more complex queries of the same type of things you've already been doing. So a lot of this stuff, as you get down here, this is multiple table problems involving joins and things like that, is just going to go through more complex examples. So again, this is where you got to make sure you really understand the stuff that we already have gone through, and then we're going to look at more complex examples, a little bit more maybe realistic examples that are a little more complex than just these simple examples we've been looking at. Okay, so that's what most of what you're going to be doing this week. But we are going to add one new topic, which is this group by syntax that you can use in SQL. And so I want to just quickly introduce what that's all about. So if we jump back to our tables, okay, so far we've just been selecting certain rows from tables, and that's a very common thing to do. But a lot of times you want to actually do something else, like where you want to actually do something that involves combining some rows in some way, usually with some sort of math. So what I mean by that is something like this. We might look at this event request table and say, well, I don't want to just list all the events that are, more than a certain amount or something like that. Maybe I want to get the average of all of the costs of all of the events in this table. Or maybe I want to get the average cost of all of the events that have been approved. So only the ones we've already approved, they're scheduled. What's the average cost of those events? So that involves joining rows together, or not joining, it's a bad word to use. Combining some rows together, right? We need data from multiple rows that we're going to do some math with. So you've already gone through some of these examples where you've seen the average function. So you have these built-in functions like average and real common functions like you have in other utilities. So you can do something like that. So we could actually say, I want to select the average of this column from this particular table. So I could do that with some SQL. If I jump back to my live SQL, I could write this. I could say select the average estimated cost from this table. And again, if I only want to get the average of the approved events, I could say where status equals approved. And when I run that, I get this result down here. It says the average of the estimated cost column is $3,500 for the approved events. Okay, so I could do that, and you've already learned that, but it's building to where we're headed. So before I jump to where I actually want to get to with the grouping, I do want to add one more thing in here. And again, you've already learned this, but it's a valuable thing to keep repeating. So this is kind of messy. Okay, so it's saying I'm getting, instead of just selecting a column, I'm selecting the average of a column, and all it's doing is saying, okay, well, that's what you said to select. Well, maybe we want to give that a little nicer name in our results. Especially, again, probably doesn't matter here because we know what that means. But sometimes you just want to actually give a column a nicer name, especially if you're looking at a lot of results, lots and lots of columns of results. So that's where I can use the as keyword, and I can call it something like this, average cost or something like that. And that's going to look a little bit nicer than average, the average function, estimated cost. So if I run this now, okay, it actually shows the results just like I typed it in. So that as, when you say select something as something else, again, that's just review, but that's just renaming a column, giving it a different name. And sometimes it's nicer to look at that in the results. So you're going to do a fair amount of that, especially as we get a little more complex queries. Okay, so that leads to where this group by comes into play. So oftentimes, not only do you want to combine some data together, like all of the rows we want to combine together to get an average cost, sometimes you want to combine the data by certain groups. So what if, let's jump back here, what if we weren't interested in all of the costs for all of the events? What if we were interested in average cost, for each facility? So this is the football stadium, all the F100s. This is the basketball arena, the F101s. Here's another football stadium. What if I was interested in looking at the average cost per facility? So I wanted to kind of essentially say, I knew I was already combining essentially in one sense all of the rows together to get the average cost. Well, at least all the rows that had approved. What if I want to combine all of the rows, so all the ones with the F100s, combine all those together to get the average of those, and then combine all the rows from the F101s together to get the average of those. So I can see these average costs for different groups. That's why they're called groups. You're figuring, how do I group the rows together to say now I want to get some aggregate value from those, or some, something that combines them together and gives me some value. So that's what group by comes into play. So if I want to take that last query and say, well, I want to break down by groups based on this facility number, I can come back here and I can add at the very end group by fac no. And so that's going to say, again, well, I'll show you what happens when I click run. Okay, now it actually broke those down into averages by one and averages by the other. Now, the problem we've got here, it worked. The problem we've got here is that we can't tell which one is which. So think for a second, what would be something we could do to add more information down here? And how could we modify this up here to show, well, which one is which? So we're only showing one column of data here in our results. So we need to add another one. We need to add that facility number too, so we can see, well, which facility number do each of these go with. So I'm going to just say fac no. And now when I run this, okay, I see which facility each of these goes with. So 101, which is the basketball arena, has an average cost of $2,000. 100, which is the football stadium, has an average cost of $5,000 of the events. So that's what group by is all about. Okay, it's about combining a bunch of rows, certain rows, into groups by some column. Okay, in this case, we were combining by that faculty or facility number column. Okay, and then getting aggregate information about that. So a sum of all of the things in those groups, or an average of all the things in those groups, something like that.